Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Altitude Shift podcast. In today's episode, I'm talking about how to come back from a professional mistake and how to rebuild trust after you've made a bad judgment call. Now, just to be clear, I'm not talking about tripping over your words during an important presentation or being 15 minutes late for a meeting. I'm also not talking about big ethical lapses in judgment that rightly get you escorted out of the building by security. But I am talking about professional judgment calls you made. Decisions that, in hindsight, weren't the right call. The ones that don't get you fired, but might quietly bruise your credibility. Maybe you pushed too hard during a meeting, or not hard enough. Maybe you passionately backed the wrong idea, or the wrong person, or at the wrong time. Maybe you got caught not being fully on top of your brief during a board meeting. Or you took a direction with a client that, in hindsight, didn't work. Whatever it was, you made a bad call. And now you feel like people are judging you. If you're lucky, you'll get some candid feedback on what went wrong and how to fix it. But more often than not, people will stay polite. They won't bring it up, or they'll say something like, don't worry about it. But you can sense they're a little embarrassed on your behalf. The reason people hold back is because no one really knows what advice to give you in a situation like that. Because this wasn't just about you getting your facts wrong, this was about your judgment. And in professional spaces, judgment is major currency. That currency tends to build up over time in fairly quiet and invisible ways. And previously I've referred to this as your trust account. When the balance in that account is high, people trust your input implicitly. You speak and they listen, because you've earned that kind of weight. But now that you made a bad call, well, you just made a pretty considerable withdrawal from that account. You're not quite in the red yet, but you've got a lot less credit to spend. Enough to make you wonder, will I ever get it back? That's an uncomfortable feeling that we probably all recognize. But I'm here to tell you that if you play your cards well, it's not permanent. And you could actually use this as an opportunity to gain even more trust in the future. That all depends on how you play your cards and what you do next. So in this episode, I'll talk about how to come back from this type of public embarrassment, and I'll then take you through a 4-step process to help you recover and rebuild that trust account. But before I take you through those 4 steps, let's take a look first at what actually happens inside your brain after you get caught out. Okay, let's say you made a professional error. Before you try to fix anything, you need to understand that your brain is about to make this much harder than it needs to be. Even a small dent to your credibility can feel surprisingly intense because your brain sees reputation as a proxy for belonging. And in evolutionary terms, losing belonging used to mean losing protection. So when your status drops, even slightly, your nervous system will treat it like a real threat. Over the next couple of hours, days, and sometimes weeks, you'll start over-monitoring your environment, reading into pauses, analyzing the tone of email responses, etc. That's your nervous system flagging every single social cue as potentially meaningful. As a result, you'll start to become hyper-attuned to how others see you, and then you start adjusting. Sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. You might start to hold back in meetings, say less, hedge your opinions a little bit. Or you might go the other way, overtalk, over-explain, try a little too hard to show how on top of things you still are. Neither response helps. Because what people are really looking out for isn't what you say next, but how you say it. They want to see you behave with steadiness. If you suddenly feel off-brand, more anxious, more performative, that becomes a new signal your bosses and your peers are going to pick up on. And the huge irony is that the real reputational impact from making a mistake often doesn't come from the mistake itself, but from the energy that you bring afterwards. Because in the long run, people probably won't remember your bad judgment call, but they will remember your response, your composure, or your lack of it in the aftermath. Okay, so let's say you made a bad judgment call. You're embarrassed and you feel your reputation is on the line. I'm going to take you through 4 steps that will allow you to regain some of that trust over time and maybe even add a little bit more to your trust account. The first step after a bad call is something that most people miss. That first step isn't about fixing, but it's about reframing. Not publicly, but internally. What derails most people after they made a bad call isn't the mistake itself, but it's the story that they tell themselves about what that mistake meant. Our first instinct is to beat ourselves up and then using it as proof that we're not very good at our job. But more often, it just means that you interpreted a situation one way and now you understand that situation differently. And with the benefit of hindsight, which as we all know is always 20/20, we would now make a different choice. That's not failure, that's just how our judgment improves and develops. That's also not you trying to spin the story or trying to save your face. It's you recalibrating. You're updating your internal logic so that it better matches what actually happened. And this part really matters because how you frame the judgment call internally shapes everything that comes next. If your inner story is, I failed, I made a big mistake, I'm useless, you'll either shrink, overcompensate, or you try to prove yourself in ways that feel a bit off. And as I said earlier, people will pick up on that. But if the story is, well, that was a useful miss, knowing what I know now, I'd make a different decision, then you'll move on more steadily. And that steadiness is exactly what people want to see from you now. So, don't rush to defend yourself. Also, don't pretend it didn't happen. And don't turn it into some unnecessary crisis that needs managing. But just start by telling yourself, that was a misjudgment. Now I understand the context better. I'm moving on. Right. So now that you've reframed the story in your own head, the second step you need to take is ask yourself, does anyone else need to hear from me? If the bad judgment call only affected you, or it's already been resolved in how you're now showing up, then silence might be fine. But here's a good test. Did your mistake or bad judgment call create work for someone else? Did it cost them time, or did it leave them even slightly exposed? If the answer to any of these questions is a yes, then you need to say something. Briefly, calmly, like the professional who's paying attention. Something like, I've been thinking about that call last week. In hindsight, I don't think I read the timing or the room quite right. I appreciate you rolling with it. That's all it takes. No crisis language, no self-flagellation, just a short signal that you've clocked the impact. If you don't do that, and there are people who are feeling the ripple effects of your decision and they hear nothing, they'll simply assume you didn't notice, or you didn't care. And if you're in a leadership role, that's really not what you want people to think. Even a passing acknowledgement of, hey, this one's on me guys, thanks for your patience, can model something far more useful than pretending it didn't happen. It shows that you're not fragile, that you can reflect, reset and move forward and without getting weird about it. And again, it shows that you're steady and that you're self-aware. And that's what makes people feel safe working with you again. So, you've reframed what happened internally and you've acknowledged it calmly and briefly with the people who needed to hear from you. The third step now is all about how you show up. Most people are not going to obsess about the details of the mistake or the bad judgment call that you made. But as I said, they will pay close attention, consciously or not, to how you carry yourself in the days that follow. Are you composed? Are you still switched on? Do you seem like someone they can still trust? This is where executive presence, or what some people call gravitas, starts to matter. People with great executive presence usually don't rush to fix the mood or to win people back. They show something we can call grace under fire. By that I mean they don't overperform or over-explain. They take a breath, they respond proportionately, and they carry on with quiet clarity. To respond with gravitas, you need to decide what kind of energy you want to project, and then make a few deliberate choices that reinforce that energy. Ask yourself, what do I want people to pick up on from me this week? Maybe it's that I'm grounded, or that I've taken it all in, or that I'm still sharp, or that I've moved on. Then let that guide your next few moves. Follow through on something. Pick up a task that no one else wants to do. Support someone else's idea but without making a big deal out of it. Deliver slightly ahead of expectation. Show up on time if you're the person who's always late. And if your misstep did affect specific people, don't just acknowledge it and then move on. Think about how to rebuild trust through small, deliberate signals of re-engagement. You don't need to make a big gesture or buy them flowers, and you definitely don't need to keep circling back to the mistake. But you do need to create some forward momentum in the relationship. For example, you could ask for their input on something that they're close to. You can include them early in a conversation where they might otherwise feel a little bit left out. In other words, signal that you value their perspective. Not in some kind of performative or guilt-ridden way, but just because you genuinely do. And if there's an opportunity to give credit, use it. Again, not as a strategy, but as a way of showing that the relationship is still important to you. It's these small, collaborative gestures that matter more than you think when it comes to repairing trust. They make it feel easy to work with you again, and they signal that things are back on track. Okay, so now you're slowly rebuilding that trust externally. There's one important fourth and final step we still haven't talked about. How do you start trusting yourself again? Remember that your professional reputation is mostly driven by your wins rather than your failures. But even after you have a few more wins again under your belt, and even long after everyone else has moved on, you might still be carrying the residue of previous mistakes. Not shame necessarily, but hesitation. What if I get it wrong again? That voice often shows up quite subtly. You might start second guessing your decisions or delaying them, or softening your opinions. You might even convince yourself that you're just being more thoughtful, even though what's really happening is that your self-trust has eroded. And if you don't tackle that immediately, that self-trust will evaporate very quickly. Here are 4 tips I can give you on how to rebuild your internal credibility. Tip number 1, separate the error from your identity. Okay, you made a call that didn't land. That doesn't mean that you've lost your edge or that your instincts aren't trustworthy. But your brain doesn't always see it that way. It tends to make it personal. It will start stitching together a little story like, oh, I can't trust myself in these situations. This is where you need to get forensic rather than fatalistic. Instead of spiraling into self-doubt, get specific. Ask yourself, what exactly went wrong here? Was it the dynamic, the power structure, the timing that you got wrong? Was your data incomplete? Did you misread the tone? Was your delivery off? Or was the context simply different than you thought? Don't allow your brain to default to vagueness like, I just messed up, or I should have known better. Because the fuzzier the story, the more likely you are to turn a situational error into a character flaw. Tip number 2, salvage the good bits. Most bad judgment calls don't come out of nowhere. They usually started with a good instinct that just got misapplied. So, instead of discarding the whole thing, ask yourself, what part of my thinking still holds up? Maybe your concern was valid, but the timing was wrong. Maybe your read of the people involved was sound, but your delivery was off. Maybe the idea itself was right, but the context wasn't ready for it. So this isn't about defending the decision to anyone else, by the way, but it's about understanding it better yourself. If you can spot what still made sense, you protect the part of your judgment that was working, so you don't lose trust in your instincts altogether. Tip number 3, rebuild your evidence bank. Self-trust doesn't return just because you want it to. It comes back whenever you start to give your brain new data, fresh proof that your judgment still works. That starts with small, intentional decisions, ones that require you to read a moment, act on it, and then watch it land. And I'm not talking about making some kind of grand comeback, but just a few well-placed choices made with clarity and good follow-through. And yes, feedback from others can help, but you don't need to wait for it. The point is to find opportunities to say to yourself, I judged the situation, I acted upon it, yay, that worked. Stack a few of those together and you start building your internal reference point in a way that isn't based on wishful thinking or positive mantras, but on recent evidence. And that's what makes your confidence feel earned again. And then finally, tip number 4, don't confuse caution with wisdom. After a misstep, it's tempting to become more cautious. And sometimes that's a good thing. But it's always worth asking yourself, is this caution coming from reflection or is it coming from fear? When your caution is rooted in reflection, it can help you read the room more clearly and act with greater intention. But when it's driven by fear, it dulls your instincts. You second guess yourself. You hold back even when you know better. So here's something practical you can do. Take the next decision you are hesitating on and then write down 2 ways to approach it. One safe and one bold. And then ask yourself, which way best reflects the version of me that's already learned from the mistake? And choose that one. So, in conclusion, how do you rebuild after a professional mistake or a bad judgment call? Well, you don't spiral, you don't panic, and you definitely don't try to turn it into some kind of TED Talk moment. Instead, you follow the 4 steps I laid out by first reframing internally what actually happened. Secondly, you then talk to whoever needs to hear from you. Then you start showing up again while at the same time focusing on rebuilding your confidence. And just to repeat myself here, because it's important, I'm not talking about catastrophic lapses in judgment here. I'm not talking about when you get caught with your fingers in the till or with your pants down. I'm talking about the kind of professional misfires that any smart, capable person makes all the time. Misreading the room, backing the wrong idea, fumbling the brief. None of those are career enders, but they're big enough to knock your confidence. And the beautiful irony is that these wobbles are often where real trust is built. Because when people see you recover, not defensively, not dramatically, but just steadily, it does something to them. It makes them feel safer around you. It makes them more likely to trust your judgment in the future, not less. So, if you're in the middle of one of those moments right now, I see you. Take a breath, you didn't blow it. You're just learning in real time. And if you follow this approach, you're going to rebuild that trust account again in no time. And maybe even with a nice little bit of interest on top of it. Good luck. Hey, it's Chris here. If this resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone else who needs to hear it. And if you want more insights on leadership, confidence, and growth, you can hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you soon.